In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. So I'd like to ask a question to the younger group in church today. And I want to ask you what two things mean, and I bet you're going to be able to tell me instantaneously. If you are staring at a screen and you see a pinwheel spinning around that's colored, or you see an hourglass on the screen, what does that mean? Mikali? Time's running out. What else does it mean? John? It's loading. It's loading, right? Now what happens if you see, what do you have, a Mac or a PC? Mac, so you see the pinwheel then, right? If you see that pinwheel going over and over and over, what does that mean? Something's loading, the internet is down, right? And for kids, they know, they see, they're like, oh, right? You see that pinwheel and you're devastated, right? You're like, oh no. Or you see the hourglass on there, or there's something wrong. There's some delay that you were not expecting. Now, for those who are a little bit older than Mikali and John, you remember that back in the day when you needed the internet, you didn't have a landline, right? You put the phone on and it would make that weird noise, and you dial up and it would be like so slow. You'd see a page go like that, and you'd, oh, wow, it's the internet, right? Or you get your mail. Rewind even now. You see the video games that are out. And what did we play, the 40 to 50-year-olds back in the day? It was a line like this and a line like this, right? And the ball would go boing, bong. It was Pong. That was it. And you saw that. I remember my friend had that game because my parents would not get it at the time. And we would go in his basement, and I said, let's play Pong. And I was so excited. And we sit there playing for hours, this thing, and you just bounce the ball back and forth. Kids right now, if you gave them a cell phone and it had Pong on it, they'd probably throw it at you, right? And say, get this out of here, what's the matter with you? But our expectations have changed through the years. The ability to get information when I was a kid, and when some of you were kids, where did you go? You went to the library. Library right now is really kind of, it's almost obsolete. You think about the libraries that, in school systems, yes, I mean, people use them for certain books, but when kids want information now, and when they do reports, what are they quoting? They're quoting online sources. So there's a different expectation in the immediacy of receiving material, the immediacy of receiving information. Why do I bring this up today? Is because we have expectations with every new device that comes out, with every new internet service that comes out, the things will be quicker, more instantaneous. They will look better. They will move smoother. They will be able to do more, and it will happen quicker than anything that we currently have. But if we were to go backwards, and we were to go back to the old brick phone, and where you didn't have even caller ID in some of the early days, right? Caller ID is something new to this generation. You'd say something's wrong. I can't go backwards. I need to go forward. I need information now. I need to know who's calling. I need to find this out. I need to look this up right now. I need my phone to tell me where this person's home is at. Where I remember when I started here at the church 15 years ago doing house blessings and having a printout of maps of homes. And then some of you who are new development, you couldn't find it. It didn't exist on maps. And now instantaneously, you don't even need to think. You can even get it on your watch and know where you're going. But what does this have to do with the gospel reading today? The disciples are asked by this man to cure the son who was epileptic and was possessed, and they couldn't do it. They expected an instantaneous response from their prayer to God. Even though they were following Christ, Christ gave them this ability to heal and to forgive and to do other things, but not to the extent that they expected or that they wanted. They could do some, but then they came back and they said, why couldn't we do this? And it wasn't the question in saying, well, we follow you. It was the fact that they were doing other things. They were doing other healings, And then they come to this point of this boy, and they can't do it. And then this particular gospel reading, we hear in other renditions that this kind can only come out with fasting and prayer. In other words, the disciples, as St. John Chrysostom writes, he says the disciples were not yet to the cross. They had not yet come to the cross, the greatness of the suffering of Christ and their own personal growth to the level of what they are written about in the book of Acts, when they are doing all these miracles over and over and over. But they hadn't gotten to that point yet. But they were expecting instantaneous response from God, that whatever they asked would be received right then and there. And this gospel reading, it connects with us in contemporary day, because we ask God for things when we need God to respond. Not beforehand many times, but right at the moment. How many kids will pray every day, help me to do good on my final exam, from day one? Probably not. But then as you get closer to that, you hear the final exam and you're like, I don't know all of them. And it's, Lord, help me with the final exam. And we start ramping up our prayers at the end instead of at the beginning. So we are under this expectation from God that when we ask, we should receive instantaneously. But God does not always respond like that, because that is not how God works. God doesn't work as a vending machine of needs, where we put our coins in, we hit the button of whatever we want, pops out, and we say, I got what I needed from God, and you come back to the vending machine again when you are in need. It is a relationship with God that we should develop, and also understanding, too, that God answers all prayers, but he answers them in a time that we might not be prepared to receive. And then what happens is we get upset, or we think he's ignored us, or we think that we haven't prayed right or something, because it's not instantaneously done, which is the same response that the disciples had today. Why couldn't we do this? And Christ didn't say to them, you will never be able to do this, or something that said to, that he would say to them that would restrict them from ever being able to do this. He said, you're still of little faith, you will grow, and he's implying all this in his statement. And then as they grow, they become the ones who never question again God's greatness, his mercy, his ability to act and respond. So for us today, we have to think about what we expect from God and what we expect instantaneously, what we've come to expect from God instantaneously. Just like when we look at our computers or our cell phones and we hit load the page, we expect it to be instantaneous, especially if we have a high-speed connection. We expect it to be right then and there. And when it's not, something is wrong. And what usually happens when that something might be wrong? Let's go back to John. If you see that pinwheel spinning over and over, what happens to your mood? You get mad. First response, you get mad. You get frustrated. You're like, what is going on here? You see people sometimes have slammed things down and it's not working, or this is not right, because we have come to expect it to be now. And when that doesn't work, and when we apply that same mentality to our prayers, we have to be careful that we don't slam our icons down and say, it's not working. It hasn't happened yet. We need to be patient and understand that we have to grow, and as we grow, our ability to receive God's grace changes for the better, and it becomes more able to be within us. Just like the disciples in the Transfiguration, which we just celebrated last week, the disciples are looking according to their ability upon the transfigured Christ. You see that Peter is the one that's looking up, and James and John are down on the ground, face down. And some of the writings say that because Peter was closer to Christ, he understood the message of Christ more and was actually the one who interacted and spoke with Christ at that point, that he was able to receive that a little bit more than the other two. So as we grow, we receive God more. And as we receive God more, we also receive the understanding of the answer to our prayers with with the patience and with the love of God that we're called to have when we ask Him for something. So don't think that your prayers are being unanswered, and don't think that any prayer that you ask would be ignored. Just remember that God answers our prayers in a time that is fitting for Him, and He also calls us to be patient, to deal with the spinning wheel or the hourglass, and to sit there and not get frustrated and walk away and say, that's it, this is not happening, I'm leaving. You know, I mention often in my sermons that people come to church over and over because at one point or another in their life, they've had some type of feeling inside, some type of warmth, and you probably weren't even expecting it. And you say, oh, I feel good today. And I don't know, it wasn't anything that was said different. It wasn't the chanting, it wasn't the sermon, it wasn't the temperature of the church. It was just something that happened, and I felt it. And people come back wanting that feeling over and over. And if we don't get it, do we throw up our hands and say it's never going to come again? Or do we come asking again, please enlighten me, inspire me, make me feel that glory of that minuscule glory of God inside of us. The things that the fathers of the church write about, and they say that feeling inside that transforms us and makes us feel alive and warm and peaceful. Those are the things that we reach out to. But don't get frustrated if you don't have it again for a while. But just keep reaching out, be patient, and understand too that God has a time frame that is beyond what we understand. And it's also a time frame that is outside of time. God is not constricted to 24 hours a day. He doesn't have to sleep 4 to 8 hours a day. He doesn't have to do anything. He is outside of time. So his understanding of the long-term plan for our life could be significantly different than our own. So be patient and understand that God does answer our prayers. But just like the disciples said, why couldn't we do it? We have to understand that that's the first question that we would ask. But the question we should be asking is, why can't we do it? Why couldn't we do it, or why can't we do it? Can we do it? Yes, we can. And to flip that question around and say that the only thing that will restrict us from doing these things and receiving God's grace is our own struggle, our own frustration. So continue to push forward in your prayers. Continue to ask God for the things that you need for your salvation, and be patient, understanding that He answers all prayers. Amen.